everyone, Lu here. We finally reached the finale to the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Before we move on to GX. For those just tuning in, this is a series where I'm reviewing every season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Up until GX as a nostalgic retrospective. Today, we're taking a look at Season 5. Season 5 is a really interesting adaptation to look at because even though the Millennium World arc wasn't 100% finished during the production, it still aired the finale similarly to the manga. Although the manga faced a lot of major character rewrites that unfortunately had to be retconned and now look like plot holes when you watch the anime or even read the manga. The main reason is because Kazuki Takahashi was sick while writing the finale, but we'll get to the drastic changes during the story because I'm not gonna dive in too much in this portion since this is just an introduction to its air date as well as, I guess, audience reception. From what I can tell from audience reception, this finale was genuinely very well liked, albeit there was certain characters that were deemed very problematic looking back now, as well as its filler before the final season storyline starts being horrendous, but other than that, it's generally a positive view from fans. Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 5 would air Christmas Eve 2003 in Japan and August 2005 in America, as well as the longest gap between English dubbing, which was usually 9 months to a year after the original airing. This season would prove to be the most changed out of all the previous seasons in terms of massive censorship. Season 5 is generally considered the darkest when we get to the Millennium World arc, so let's take a look at the story for ourselves and see how bad the censorship was. Okay, so to make everyone, including myself, scream in irritation, we get one last filler arc involving the Kaiba Grand Prix. I'm gonna be honest that this filler genuinely fucking sucks. Siegfried and Leon are so laughably weak as antagonists, it's not even funny. And there's a reason Kaiba roasts the ever-loving fuck out of Siegfried, because he sucks. I hate this filler, but TLDR. To fix the PR from the previous season, Kaiba hosts a Grand Prix tournament with a bunch of forgettable duelists meant to lose to our protagonists, and Yugi's grandpa for some reason. Siegfried von Schroeder is the head of the von Schroeder tech company we're just now hearing about, and he wants to destroy Kaiba Corp, blah blah blah. You guys already know that literally every Kaiba storyline is the same at this point. He tries to get his brother Leon to intercept the tournament too by giving him a card that gives a virus to the Kaiba Corp network for some reason. How the fuck does a paper card do that? I don't know, maybe the description was like some shitty EXE that like Kaiba Corp's network opens or something. So Yugi wins because of course he does, and Siegfried learns the importance of family, so Kaiba continues to look like the best big brother ever. Hate it, boring, uninspiring. So let's move on to the actual plot because I am not gonna go any further into this because it just sucks. It's terrible. I hate it. We start our actual story with Ryo Bakura running for his life into a church where he's confronted by Yami Bakura, who tells him that they have unfinished business, and like it or not, Ryo Bakura is going to be taken over completely in a really interesting church scene. I don't know, I really like this scene actually. We then get a flashback to Yugi's grandpa and how he found the Millennium Puzzle. I guess before becoming a chill archaeologist, he was an Indiana Jones type of character, and I think that's genuinely pretty cool spin-off material, or at least some fan fiction material. This is all asked by Yugi because he wants to know as much about Egypt as he can when he's going over there to help the Pharaoh uncover his memories. Basically, we were told just a little earlier that for preservation purposes, the tablet containing the Pharaoh's prophecy in the Dominant Museum last season was moved back to Egypt. Meanwhile, Rex and Weevil are still fucking here for some reason and want to steal the guard cards now. Seriously, what the fuck are they doing here? It's bad enough that they were in the background of the Grand Prix tournament doing fuck all, but now this too? Ugh. But luckily after they steal Yugi's gym bag, they find it's the Millennium items with Yami Bakura standing ominously over them. Yami Bakura basically had them take the items for him so he could get the ring and the eye back, although he'll give it back when this journey is over to complete his master plan. He needs it right now for the rest of his big evil plan. Also, can I just say that I love Yami Bakura's black coat in this arc? I know he's dressed exactly the same as Battle City, but Damn, that coat just adds a cool factor to him. Then he leaves after a small confrontation with the Pharaoh, where he next goes to Kaiba for some reason. I guess he wants his Blue Eyes White Dragon's abilities or something, or wants Kaiba to join on this journey for whatever reason, but honestly this feels more like the writers just can't fucking leave Kaiba alone. This was also to showcase Yami Bakura's new trump card or monsters this season, the Diabound series. This is mainly to tie into the actual main antagonist of Yu-Gi-Oh!, but we're not there yet. So far now, this neat snake thingy is here, and they somewhat follow the card's actual description, except sealing the main burst ability of a monster. He tells Kaiba that he's quitting the duel for now, and that if he wants actual answers, go to Egypt with the Millennium Eye and the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Again, I have no idea why he wanted Kaiba there, when Kaiba literally does nothing but run around and question shit, but okay. With the cheerleader squad arriving in Egypt, they're then greeted by Ishizu, Merrick, and Odeon, so it's nice to see them again. I mean, obviously, we know we were gonna see them involved again this season, but it's nice to have a reunion. Facing the tablet, Taya gives the Pharaoh a cartouche from the gift shop at the airport and tells him that when he remembers his name, he should engrave his name into it so he'll never forget it again. It's actually really sweet and an important one that we'll use for later for finally knowing the Pharaoh's name. Call it Chekhov's cartouche, if you will. For context, again, on why his name is so important, in ancient times for pharaohs, your name was extremely important and part of how you would move on to the afterlife. If a pharaoh had their name purposefully erased from history by being a general dick, it was a personal fuck you as to ensure that that pharaoh would never move on to the afterlife. This is why the Pharaoh is a spirit in the first place, I think. He can't remember his name, so he can't move on, and that's something extremely important here. The manga emphasizes this more, explaining that he's not supposed to be here, and that's why things go topsy-turvy all the time. But I'm only adding the manga here because I feel like this is such an important detail to the Pharaoh and his motivation. Anyway. After holding up the 3 Egyptian god cards, the Pharaoh's soul is sucked into a world of his past, and so is Yami Bakura. The reason Yami Bakura is able to do this is thanks to all the way back in Battle City. If you remember when the puzzle was shattered in the duel with the possessed bandit Keith, Yami Bakura put a piece of his soul inside the puzzle so that when the Pharaoh's soul was dragged from the puzzle, it would drag all of Yami Bakura so he too could infiltrate the Pharaoh's past and enact his evil grand plan. Now, I should mention that this is not time travel from what I can tell. This is basically like a simulation of the Pharaoh's final, weeks? Months? As Pharaoh, and nothing that happens here changes the future. It's almost like a dream, I guess. Here we see the Pharaoh's time as Pharaoh, where somehow no one bothers to mention his fucking name. Like, this is his court and no one mentions his name? Alright, well, I should probably name his court at least then. We have Seto Kaiba's past life, Priest Seto, who holds the Millennium Rod. The Millennium Rod here is shown that it can guide and manipulate the soul. Mahad, the Pharaoh's childhood best friend, who holds the Millennium Ring. The ring's true power is to sense darkness like a compass, hence the dangly bits, and how Yami Bakura was able to always find where the Pharaoh was. Shada. I think this is the past life of Shadi. I don't know, but he looks like Shadi when he was alive in Darkside of Dimensions. He holds the Millennium Key, which can control and read the soul. Karim, who holds the scales. The scales are never used in the anime, while Shadi does use them in the manga, and the scales are used to weigh the sins of the soul. If you remember hearing about funeral preparations for a pharaoh in school, you'll know scales were important when Egyptian priests would allegedly judge a soul's good karma via weighing the heart against a feather. I don't know if that's true since I don't want to find anything gross when looking that up, but I guess bringing back that kind of old school trivia thing here. And Aknadin, who wields the Millennium Eye. Much like we see with Pegasus in Duelist Kingdom, the eye can read minds and release the soul. Almost forgot to mention Isis, the past life of Ishizu, possibly the ancestor of the Ishtar family, I don't know, but she wields the Millennium Necklace, which has the power to see into the future. All of them demonstrate this when extracting the Ka from an assassin who tries to kill the Pharaoh on his coronation day. Now, Ka is something, I'm gonna be honest, I felt like this trying to research. Ka is basically a dual monster spirit that's manifested from the human soul, or Ba. Think of it like a stand in JoJo's and how it's basically a manifestation of the soul with a yin and yang balancing act here. While you can fully extract the Ka from someone's body, if it's an evil Ka, like an exorcist I guess, a full extraction could easily kill someone, while a Ba or human soul can fuse with their Ka too. It's not really important in the English dub since they remove it completely, but it's extremely important in both the original version of the anime as well as in the manga. Oh, and back in the real world, Exposition Ghost Shoddy's time is to fucking shine this season as he dumps exposition to tell us exactly what the Pharaoh is experiencing, and the cheerleader squad asking for his help to teleport them to the past dream thingy so they can help him. The reason they want to help is different in both versions, but to explain it in the middle ground here for both versions, they just want to help prevent something bad from happening to the Pharaoh. In order to go into the memory world, they have to find the door to it inside the puzzle, so it's also to delay the gang so the Pharaoh can try and figure out shit on his own just a little longer. The gang also mentioned they've been friends for 4 years, which is when Yugi first built the puzzle. So you mean to tell me these kids missed 4 years of school? Good luck graduating, guys. Okay, so back to the memory world story. Yami Bakura is also transported to the past vision realm thingy, and it's explained he was a tomb thief and bandit king, so he begins to remember his own past. He ransacks the nameless pharaoh's father's tomb. For quick context, I guess Yami Yugi's father's name is Aknadin. I just know that's gonna take like at least 10 takes to get right. And what do you know, as I'm recording this right now, I was almost right. Meanwhile, the Pharaoh's priests are questioning Mahad and how he was able to let an assassin break in here when palace security is his job, already showing the drama and tension between the priests due to all their clashing personalities and loyalties towards the Pharaoh. Mahad in particular is his childhood best friend, and priest Ceco is someone who wants to prove himself. I'm honestly thriving for this palace drama here, but maybe I'm just saying that because I've been watching the tutors in between working on writing the season out, so maybe that's just me self-projecting the tutors onto this. Oh, also, Mahad's Ka is Illusion Magician, which looks suspiciously like a certain magician in the Pharaoh and Yugi's deck, so we get a pretty quick conclusion on who his modern incarnation is. Okay, so after fighting with the Pharaoh's priests, Bakura busts out with the Pharaoh's father and drops a bombshell that the Millennium items were created using the bloodshed of a village called Kela. Aknadin is shook because he thought everyone and everything about this village was wiped out, but guesses Bakura must have been a sole survivor of the slaughter. A major thing here to mention is that people mishear this scene in the English dub as Bakura mentioning his name is Akefia, when he actually says a thief and stealer of souls. We never get Bakura's real past life name, so no, Akefia is not his real name here. Although I do like the name Akefia for him, and it draws some forgotten but interesting historical context about Egypt. Not gonna go into it though, but there are some fascinating videos about it on here. Anyway, as I said earlier, Diabound can also steal the main ability of its enemy, so it stole White Lightning attack from Blue Eyes White Dragon, which calls both Kaiba and a mysterious girl with white hair and blue eyes. Meanwhile, the cheerleader squad is transported inside the Millennium puzzle with Shoddy as a guide to take them to the world of the Pharaoh's memories. And Kaiba keeps getting visions of the past, so he gets so desperate for answers that he decides to head over to Egypt at long last. When Bakura leaves, everything just kind of chills out. Everyone's trying to figure out what the actual fuck just happened. Isis is struggling to see into the future. Ceco suggests to Aknadin that they do a massive criminal roundup to take their Ka in hopes of grabbing a powerful one enough to defeat Bakura. The Pharaoh notices a pyramid in the sky no one else can, and learns a little bit more about his past. Mainly that Mahad and a girl named Mana were his best friends growing up. Maybe Mana in particular is his love love interest too, but I'm honestly really 50-50 on vase shipping, so if you guys want to sit here and say they have a thing for each other, feel free, because I'm pretty mixed on it. We all know that Mahad and Isis definitely had a thing going on though. We also get a sweet flashback to when the Pharaoh was a kid and he saved Mahad's life by sucking out the poison when he was bit by a venomous snake. I think it's a really sweet scene, and it shows that really he and Yugi aren't that different after all when it comes to their personalities and friends. Like I've been saying throughout this entire series, the Pharaoh, or Yami Yugi, is just Yugi with confidence. So Mahad locates Bakura, who also eats a raw ass onion when he's scheming, so you know he's just fucking evil with that. And with the ring, kind of figures out where he is and where he'll be, so he sets up a lie to everyone except himself that he's gonna go reseal Aknadin's tomb after the break, but in reality, he's gonna try to fight Bakura with all his powers because he's actually only ever used his powers at half because he's so strong. However, due to Bakura's hatred and possibly other darkness shenanigans, Diabound has grown a lot bigger and stronger, but the same goes for Mahad's illusion magician, thanks to the power of friendship for him, I guess. This fighting though does wake the Pharaoh up, where he senses and technically sees Mahad is fighting by the fact that his tomb is glowing like a flashlight, waking up everyone in Egypt in the process. Meanwhile, Mahad comes close to killing Diabound, but thanks to Diabound's absorption ability, Mahad missed an attack and it's back to fighting for his life. Did I mention there's a fuck ton of death traps in here too? Cut to Mana and the Pharaoh, who are in Mahad's temple to figure out how bad this shit is when they see his Ka is fighting really hard against it based on its glow, so they decide to take off and go help Mahad because the power of friendship always saves the day in the modern world. Mana helps out even more by sending a bird to alert the Pharaoh's court to help out too, because I'm pretty sure they didn't know. Meanwhile, the gang is lost inside the puzzle, but Yugi finds an interesting door with Yami Bakura inside that predicts that he'll be taken over by someone else, or as Shadi says, his true form, hinting once again that Bakura is not as black and white as we think he is. Back to Mahad knowing he's going to die and lose and always wanting to protect the Pharaoh because that's his bestie, Mahad fuses himself with his Ka, which bursts the monster known as Dark Magician. This explains why Dark Magician has always had an attachment to Yami Yugi in particular. It's literally the monster incarnation of his best friend, which I always thought was really sweet. It's also why Dark Magician didn't attack Yugi in the Pharaoh's soul room back in season 1. He thought it was the Pharaoh because he senses his best friend. He let him be. I guess you can also kind of put 2 and 2 together that Mana is Dark Magician Girl, obviously, considering she looks like a ye-old version of Dark Magician Girl, and the fact that she's Mahad's apprentice, something the cards heavily hint that Dark Magician Girl is Dark Magician's apprentice. Thanks to literally just huddling together and thinking real hard, the gang finally enter the memory world, but Shadi can't come with them because he's only an exposition ghost, not a plot device ghost. Though, because the gang didn't exist back then, and it's just a memory world, no one can see or interact with them unless they have a high magical concentration. Back to the palace. Everyone apologizes for fucking up again and not being able to save or protect Mahad, where Seto makes some suggestions, mainly closing off the city and upping security. If you're wondering about Bakura, by the way, he barely managed to escape with his life. This leads to Seto and Shada on patrol, where Seto suggests experimenting and extracting Ka from the population, but explains that it would only be the criminal. That's when they begin to round up criminals, when one of them tells him a white dragon is here in Egypt, which leaves Seto shook. Meanwhile, the gang meet a spirit by the name of Bobasa, while a girl with white hair is getting stoned. Yeah, Bobasa just kind of makes me uncomfortable. I mean, the dude kind of looks like Mr. Popo from Dragon Ball Z and is just a bad design all around. Obviously though, they try to help the girl when Seto steps in to help her instead. Shada tries to read her soul and is scared shitless by her Ka, but Seto takes her in as a guest. The rest for the gang is just fumbling around with Bobasa until they find a way to actually meet up with the Pharaoh. I'm not sure what they think they're gonna accomplish here, but who knows. That night, though, Bakura infiltrates the palace and the ring makes him invisible. Since when the fuck could the ring turn you invisible? Where the fuck was that for all the times Bakura needed to move quietly? I guess the ring has faulty batteries too. Meanwhile, Aknadin and Ceco are arguing about how ethical it is to just round up a bunch of criminals and fuck with their ka, and it leads to Ceco storming off and Bakura ambushes Aknadin. He starts taunting Aknadin and drops a bombshell for us that Ceco is actually his son. I guess us Yu-Gi-Oh fans have at least an idea of what Kaiba's biological father looks like then. As Ceco cools down from the conversation, he remembers that white-haired girl when he was a kid because she was captured by bandits and was likely going to have some very bad things happen to her. When he freed her, the bandits were furious and lit Seto's village on fire, which likely killed his mom in the process. Just when they were going to kill Ceco, a giant white dragon kills the thieves, which saves Seto's life. He doesn't know if the dragon and the girl are 100% connected, but he has a feeling they are in some way, but he can't be 100% sure, but he still wants to protect her. I don't know about you guys, but this sounds like love at first sight to me. Now, in the dub, it's explained that Bakura's anger and darkness in his soul is due to the genocide that happened in his village called Elna. He decides to use Aknadin, who we'll see in a second why Bakura might hate him as much as the previous Pharaoh, and corrupts his mind so he'll fall to madness and darkness. Except Bakura is kind of caught in the aftermath where he and the Pharaoh have a showdown, chasing each other throughout all of Egypt on horseback. This leads to the cheerleader gang finally finding the Pharaoh so they can go chase after him too. In the meantime, during this chase and battle, we get a flashback with Aknadin on how the Millennium items were created. Mainly, it was Aknadin's idea in order to protect all of Egypt from an invasion. The previous Pharaoh didn't know about the genocide involved in making the items until way later, so he was on board with it thinking no one would get hurt in making the items. In another crazy twist, by the way, Aknadin is also the Pharaoh's uncle, which makes Ceco and the Pharaoh shippers cringe like crazy knowing they're cousins. It's also just kind of weird to have Kaiba's past life and Yugi's technical past life be cousins. I don't know, the reason behind that one just feels kind of weird. To make sure no one but him knew about the genocide, he also hypnotized the guards with magic so they wouldn't know they were killing innocent people in severe poverty and assumed it was all bloodthirsty criminals. Baby Bakura being the only survivor who watched his family and friends be slaughtered for the items. What I don't get is how he managed to survive. Like, did he just kind of hide somewhere, or did one of his family members send him running into the night? I don't know, but it does make for some fun fan theories at least. Although the items were made, an evil creature was born from the malice of a bunch of impoverished people and thieves, which I think is implied to have possessed baby Bakura, which is why he's so evil, on top of watching his entire family be murdered. While the items saved all of Egypt, the cost was of thousands of lives, and we'll see later that the previous Pharaoh did eventually learn about the genocide and how it affected him deeply. Except Bakura's corruption of Aknadin now has him believing that Ceco should be the Pharaoh of Egypt because that's his son, and I guess he thinks the Pharaoh is a weak bitch or something. Dude can control the Egyptian gods, but okay dude, he's a weak bitch I guess. Back to the Pharaoh and Bakura. They're basically pulling an ancient Egyptian speedball run here by fighting with their stance, Ka on horseback. Bakura's Diabound is really strong now, and Egypt catches on fire from the fight. Fun times. Even the Pharaoh's court tries to join in, but when Karim gets hurt, the Pharaoh decides to do this solo so no one gets hurt. Except Aknadin sabotages the whole fight by destroying Slifer's tablet, which heavily injured the Pharaoh. Luckily it's not his main Ka, but damn, that was a close call there. He even passes out from the pain and energy that took out of him, but the cheerleader squad finally find the Pharaoh, and their friendship gives him the second wind he needs to go fight after Bakura. He actually manages to defeat Bakura with Mega Ultra Chicken, otherwise known as Ra, but Bakura's barely alive body manages to turn back time enough so he could rule this battle in his favor. Is it me, or has this entire memory world kind of felt like a D&D campaign with a dickhead dungeon master? I wonder what's up with that. Okay, so Bakura basically beats the shit out of the Pharaoh, takes the puzzle, and sends him plummeting to what we think is his death, but the cheerleader squad and Ceco are in massive denial that he's dead. One, because the cheerleader squad knows this world won't exist anymore if he's dead, and Ceco because he just knows, I guess. This does leave the cheerleader gang in a shit position though, as they're chased by Bakura's ring wraiths, but Babasa steps in to finally do something, so I'm glad he's doing something beyond just existing for comedy relief. As things wind down with Bakura fleeing, Shada finds Aknadin and later tells him about the dragon girl because he's still super shocked about her. Except Ceco finds that Aknadin basically kidnapped her and wants to torture her to use her for her ka. This is when Ceco realizes Aknadin is full-on Delulu now, as he wants to plot with Ceco to take over the throne, but refuses and shames the shit out of Aknadin for trying to hurt an innocent girl. Also because we're not stupid and we can see that Ceco and this girl clearly have a one true love thing going on about them, right? Unless it's just the blue shipper in me. Ceco steps in to save the mysterious girl where the platform falls down, so it's just Ceco holding himself and this girl by a thread. Left with no other choice as she wants to protect Ceco, the mysterious girl uses her ka, which is the blue eyes white dragon, aka Kaiba's past life's waifu was his favorite card. After she saves their lives but passes out from the intense strength her ka has, Aknadin suggests her sealing her soul in the tablet and Ceco usurp the throne, but he is disgusted with that and says that they will find the Pharaoh with no intentions of betraying him. If this were Kaiba, his ass would have sat on that throne faster than the Nile River's current. Meanwhile, Bakura already returned the puzzle and ring to the tablet thingy the items were forged in, while announcing to literally no one that his evil plan is to awaken an evil entity named Zorc the Dark One. Zorc tells him that they need the 8th key, which Bakura realizes is the Pharaoh's name. I don't know how he's gonna find his name, but this is Yu-Gi-Oh, so don't question it. Cut to the cheerleader squad having adventures with Babasa. They're slowly being followed by Bakura's ring wraiths and meet Mana, who is practicing her magic. In a shocking twist of events, Mana can actually see them due to her high magical concentration. Same with Babasa, who also clearly has high magical concentration. The ring wraiths show up, but again Mana pushes them back in a scene that just kind of reminds me of when a female magical character also thwarted ring wraiths with water. Either that or I just like Lord of the Rings way too much. They do find a clue where the Pharaoh could be, so they go searching that area where we finally get to see the Pharaoh all this time. He's injured and passed out in a cave that's nowhere near where he fell in the previous battle, while lamenting over all these questions he has about his past. In this lamenting, he unlocks all his memories with his father. His father, whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce again, was actually really loving, albeit strict as he got older. When he was about 8 to 12 years old, his father brought him to an ancient altar of the Egyptian gods, where we kind of get a hint that the Pharaoh was a crybaby as a kid, maybe? As a child, the Pharaoh watched as his father begged for forgiveness from the Egyptian gods for killing thousands of people and creating the items in the first place. He doesn't ask to be forgiven, but to spare his son because he's an innocent and doesn't deserve to have his sins passed on to him. Which is surprisingly interesting sins of the father theme that's a little more prevalent in the manga than in the anime, but I still like it. When the Pharaoh wakes up and realizes his father gave up his own safety and possible ascension into the afterlife for him, he awakens to see a pretty cool golden dude named Hassan tell him that Zorc is going to be awakened soon. I guess well enough, he stumbles out of the cave and tries to make it back so he can attempt to stop Zorc as well as honor his father's legacy by keeping the peace without, genocide and all that. Meanwhile, Mana tells the gang she's not very good at magic, but Yugi and Taya encourage her that she'll someday be strong enough because she looks like Dark Magician Girl. The gang finally reunite with the Pharaoh, so there's a lot of catching up to do, but we don't have time for that because remember, we have to see what Kaiba's doing. Kaiba shows up to Egypt and meets with Ishizu, Merrick, and Odeon. He asks to see the tablet, but it's not at the Cairo Museum anymore, but instead moved back to the Valley of the Kings, if you remember. He shows them the eye and tells them that Bakura is the one who dragged him all the way here. Ishizu takes Kaiba to the tablet thingy, while the gang are all hanging out and catching up. The Pharaoh only remembers time spent with his father and how much his father loved him, but it's clear he doesn't remember his childhood friendship with Mahad and Mana yet, which is sad and kinda fucked up. I mean, Mahad died for his bestie, while his bestie has no memories of the time they spent together. Taya asks if he at least remembers his name, but he doesn't, and no one will call him or tell him his name either. Instead, they call him things like my Pharaoh or your highness or whatever, which I don't know is accurate. I mean, I know names were important to pharaohs, but I think because this world is based off of his memories and he doesn't remember his name, then this world is reflecting that by not giving him an answer. It's weird mind shit to me, unless I'm wrong and court staff didn't actually call pharaohs by their names. This is one of those things that wouldn't be really documented, I don't think, or at least I couldn't find anything, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about this down below. Back at the palace, Ceco is looking over the girl. Her name is Kisara, but I can't recall when her name is mentioned, unless it was mentioned like in that flashback earlier to how they met, and I just forgot to mention it. But yeah, her name is Kisara. Anyway, so he's concerned about her safety, the issue being that Kisara's Ba, or human soul, is fused with her Ka, so unlike some where removing their Ka might not kill them or even cause a change of heart, removing Kisara's Ka would quite literally kill her. Isis's visions from her necklace see the pharaoh is alive, and so Shada is going to escort him back to the Nile riverbank, while Aknadin is fucking pissed the pharaoh is still alive. When Shada catches up with the pharaoh, he tells him that they also found Bakura, whose base is located in Koelna. As the pharaoh gets ready to confront him, the gang want to help, but the pharaoh doesn't want them getting hurt and lets them know he's a big boy who can handle this. Meanwhile, the palace staff are also going to go to Koelna to confront Bakura, which shakes the fuck out of Aknadin that he's being confronted at the same place where all this whole mess started in the first place. As the pharaoh, Mana, and Shada enter Koelna, the atmosphere is extremely eerie as spirits of the people who died horribly swirl all over the place. In the original, the pharaoh points out that it's actually hard to breathe here from the weight of all the angry spirits. They're suddenly attacked like that one episode of SpongeBob with the guy who was number 1, as Bakura uses the ring to manipulate the souls of his angry family and friends to attack them, as Mana decides to put on her big girl pants and someday be as fearless as Mahad was, and Shada summons his monster. The two of them fight off the skelly boys while the pharaoh presses on to find Bakura. He eventually finds some basement bunker place to confront Bakura. Bakura tells him the truth of the Millennium items, that they were created with the lives of the villagers and even attacking soldiers of Koelna, as the pharaoh is attacked by the angry spirits of Koelna. He feels stunned to know his father did all this, but didn't he just get a flashback about his father asking for forgiveness for all this and to spare his son? As the pharaoh struggles against, he summons his ace, the Dark Magician. If you remember, Mahad fused his Ba with his Ka, so that's how the Dark Magician came to be, who the pharaoh can now confirm as a monster now. Bakura reiterates on how the items were created, and although Mahad confirms it's true, what Bakura failed to mention was that the pharaoh's father was never told how the items were created. If you remember, only Aknadin at the time knew the real truth of how the items were created, and when the pharaoh's father found out, he was horrified and completely beside himself with anguish over thousands of innocent lives being used to make the items. Even on his deathbed, he felt like he failed as pharaoh. That's when the pharaoh argued his father only wanted peace and plans to restore that peace by defeating Bakura, so begins a stand battle with Bakura and the pharaoh. During the battle, Mahad and the pharaoh almost beat him several times, but Bakura ends up absorbing the angry souls of the villagers in order to make his Diabound even stronger than it's already gotten. Just before Mahad can be killed again for attacking Diabound, Mana finally comes in to summon her own Ka and uses her Ka of Dark Magician Girl to help in the battle, while the Pharaoh's court comes in to also help. Honestly, this is looking like Bakura is really gonna lose here. Because Bakura is a fucking cheater, he then summons 3 Diabounds to attack. Obviously, they're getting overwhelmed by 3 Diabounds when Shimon, Karim, Seto, and Isis show up in the nick of time to help make the fight way more fair. Except no matter how hard they try, they can't penetrate Diabound's spirit shield. Meanwhile, Shada senses a great darkness and follows it until he accidentally stumbles upon Bakura's Diabound tablet. Aknadin realizes that Diabound was quite literally created by the angry spirits of Koelna, but Shada tries to destroy the tablet. Before he can, Aknadin beats his ass with a brick and takes the Millennium key. Okay, so they're unable to defeat Bakura. One thing I forgot to mention was important later was that Bakura implanted a part of himself in Tristan. Man, what is up with Tristan getting the short end of the stick in later seasons? First, he was the only one to get rid of the Millennium Ring, then he ends up a monkey, and now a puppet for Bakura. Okay, so just as Bakura reminds us of that plot point, now Tristan is acting all possessed and not himself. With Bakura sort of possessing Tristan, the gang put together that the Pharaoh was the one to destroy remnants of his own name because his name was how he managed to seal away Zorc in the past. Since the gang know that the password to sealing Zorc is the Pharaoh's name, they decide to head back to the palace to find records of the Pharaoh's name. As for the stone tablet containing his name, it wasn't made until after everything, but I'll get to that later because I have a lot to say about the context of that tablet that was heavily retconned. Back to the Pharaoh and his court, they're still fighting Bakura and struggling real fucking bad still. It just keeps getting worse when Karim is attacked and Bakura takes his scales from him. This is really bad news because the Millennium Scale is quite literally just polymerization. Knowing this battle can't be won, the Pharaoh attempts to sacrifice himself as the dark souls of Kolelna attempt to eat his soul from the inside out. I have to wonder if this is how the Pharaoh ended up with darkness in his heart, as seen in earlier seasons. That feels like a good explanation to me anyway. They never explain why the Pharaoh had darkness in his heart in like the early seasons when he was first awakened from the puzzle. Except as the souls were just about to eat his soul, the Pharaoh's father stepped in because he is always watching over his son. He appears to absorb all the evil spirits possessing the Pharaoh and Diabound that it actually weakens Diabound and releases Shada from the tablet because he was sealed in there, I guess? Guiding the souls to the afterlife and getting stuck in wherever with them, I guess. The battle continues on more equal footing this time. The Pharaoh defeats Bakura with ease this time, but he refuses to give up and puts the Millennium Puzzle and Ring into the tablet thingy, where Aknadin shows up to also be evil and announce that he created the Millennium items and has the key that he stole from Shada earlier. When Bakura had put in the items, he turned to sand and poofed, where Bakura's evil spirit, I guess, announces that this isn't the last time they'll see him, and Shada shows up too late to warn everybody that Aknadin is now evil. Meanwhile, the cheerleader squad is going around the place to find records of the Pharaoh's name, except a possessed Tristan is also looking to find his name, which I don't know what a bunch of Japanese teenagers are expecting to find when they can't read a lick of ancient Egyptian language, but okay. Aknadin freezes everyone with the eye or the key, I guess, and just yoinks the rest of the items from everyone. At least, I think he's using the eye or the key? Gee, freezing everyone sure would have made Pegasus' scheme a lot easier in Duelist Kingdom, wouldn't it? You see what I mean about these faulty ancient Egyptian batteries? Though I have to admit, Aknadin is a particular kind of fucking crazy to rip out the Millennium Eye right from his head, though considering when Yami Bakura did that to Pegasus in Duelist Kingdom, the dude was medically injured until season 4. Or died if you read the manga. Watching this unfold makes the Pharaoh realize that something isn't right here. Bakura faded away, so why can he still hear his voice? Not to mention the timey-wimey shit he pulled earlier. And it just hits him that this isn't just a shadow game, but an actual game. The Pharaoh wakes up to see that basically he and Bakura are playing the world's most unfair D&D campaign ever, as Bakura is both player and dungeon master. The English dub says this is in the Shadow Realm, but I think the original mentions something about a pocket space. At least I think it's a pocket space. Basically, this whole game is both for the Pharaoh to piece together his past, as well as also, in the dub at least, rewriting the past itself. This is super fucked because now Zorc has been fully released from the tablet thingy, now that all 7 items have been put together, which means that if he doesn't defeat Zorc, then pretty much the entire world goes to shit, and the cheerleader squad will die. Bakura then explains that as Dungeon Master, he also has special cheating devices that he can use only once, like freezing time and reversing time up to 3 times, which, like, my gosh, Bakura is an asshole Dungeon Master, dude. This honestly gets super confusing to me because this means there's like 3 Bakuras running around. I don't know how to keep track of all these evil ancient Egyptian spirits. This is hard as hell to focus on. When Zorc basically asks what the fuck Aknadin wants, he declares that Ceco should be king because that's his son, and it makes Ceco shook to his very core. I mean, I can't blame him when we literally saw a biological parent in Yu-Gi-Oh! What? 3 times? Zorc then gives overwhelming power to Aknadin, and this turns him into Great Shadow Magus, which honestly I thought this was a Yu-Gi-Oh card for the longest time, but it turns out it's not. Man, that's a missed opportunity because I actually really like this design. Bakura then announces that he doesn't actually need his name anymore, although he's still using Tristan to find his name because he has an hourglass that'll fully awaken Zorc because fucking reasons, I guess. Though Tristan does actually find where the tablet is, but it's blank, so that's weird. Meanwhile, Aknadin is about to blast everyone to smithereens when Hassan shows up in the nick of time. The Pharaoh announces that he has a Deus Ex Machina game piece too, and it's Hassan. But how, when he didn't realize he was in a D&D game like 10 minutes ago? I don't know, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh, so don't question it. Defeating Aknadin because his new name's long as fuck and I'm not gonna say it every time, Hassan freed everyone from the Millennium Eye or key freeze spell thingy, so Bakura decides to gloat by saying that basically if him or his friends die in the board game, they die in real life. To be honest though, this D&D finale works way better if you read the manga from its original Kakegurui meets Saw concept of each chapter being a brand new game with gruesome punishment for losing. Especially when a D&D styled board game is how Yami Yugi and Yami Bakura actually met in person in the manga. So in the end it feels way more of a full circle moment, but it's actually a really cool concept, so even though it doesn't feel as thematically satisfying, I'll take it. Okay, so back to Ancient Egypt D&D map. Hassan confirms that Ceco is actually Aknadin's son because he's still in denial and said basically what we already knew, that Aknadin has completely overrun by darkness because of his jealousy towards his brother. Cut back to the real world and Kaiba's heading down to the stone tablet room thingy where the cheerleader squad went in the first place. He sees Portio passed out on the stairs and enters the room to see everyone passed out too. Seeing the tablet, the Millennium Eye starts acting up and he starts to see pieces of his past life through the Millennium Eye. Cutting back to the ancient Egyptian episode of Mori, I guess, Aknadin explains that he was always jealous and upset at his brother because his brother was actually extremely passive while Aknadin took a more aggressive approach. This only got worse when the Millennium items were created because his brother got all the fame and praise while Aknadin was left in the shadows and had to abandon his wife and son to protect them. While Shimon and Hassan say that the items didn't bring any glory because it just birthed Zorc because of the genocide or like awakened him or whatever. Ceco though is particularly hurt by this because while he didn't know Aknadin was his father, he viewed him as a mentor or fatherly figure, and it's hard to imagine the man who dedicated so much of his time to teaching and training him would turn out to be an envious maniac. Aknadin then repeatedly tries to mind control Ceco, but it doesn't really work because of the power of family, friendship, Hassan. I'm not really sure, but the back and forth is a little annoying here. Then Kisara, having girlfriend powers, senses Ceco is in danger and goes running after him. Meanwhile, possessed Tristan goes after Kisara in secret, or watches her, which confuses me because wasn't he just with a Bobasa? So I don't know what the fuck is this consistency right now. Back to the cheerleader squad. I like how Tristan is acting like a complete dick and they're not noticing he's possessed for the second time. Yeah, so anyway, after arguing with Bobasa and fat jokes in the English dub, they decided to look for more food for Bobasa because they insist this dude's important and they have to feed him. And they're actually right about that because for some reason Bobasa is a djinn and instead of rubbing a magic lamp, they just feed him a fuck ton and he'll grant any wish you want. In this case, they wish for the Pharaoh's name, and so he flies them right to the Pharaoh's tomb because I guess his staff just expected him to die and prepared his tomb already. Then again, this was ancient Egypt, so a single sneeze would kill you at the ripe old age of 10 years old. Yeah, so Babasa literally poofs because he was a secret hidden shortcut in the D&D game that Bakura didn't know about despite being Dungeon Master. Cut back to the D&D table and Bakura announces that he has a secret pawn, which is Kaiba, and draws him into the ancient Egyptian game and revives himself, so now there's 3 Bakuras running around all over the place. How is this possible? I have no idea. Okay, so back to the fight with Yami Bakura back. He tells Seto to join their side because he's the chosen one who can control the Blue Eyes White Dragon, where Shada talks about how powerful Kisara is, and now with Yami Bakura and Aknadin trying to brainwash Seto. To make things worse, Bakura summons Diabound again without a tablet. Basically, your dude is cheating again, but I think we all know Bakura has been cheating this whole time. Aknadin then takes Seto with him through a portal, I guess, to further brainwash him because 3 episodes of just standing around talking in one place about the same thing over and over again wasn't going to push the plot forward. Bakura's plan is to stall everyone until Zorc's arrival in the meantime. Kaiba then wakes up in ancient Egypt and is weirded the fuck out that no one can see him, and people go right through him. For a guy who made a fuck ton of VR games at this point, I'm honestly surprised he isn't thinking this isn't a video game. Pulling himself to try and figure out what's going on, he ends up running into Kisara. Due to Kisara's extremely high magical concentration due to her Ka, she can see him. Kaiba remembers her from all the visions he's had throughout the seasons, but she's just confused on why he looks so similar to Seto, but tells him that they'll meet again. Even though they met for only 0.2 seconds, little kid me immediately started shipping Kisara and Seto Kaiba. I can't be the only one who sees the big picture between them, right? Right? Yeah, so Bakura just kind of poofed everyone across Kalelna and forced them to fight to survive with big strong monsters a lot of them can't handle on their own. The Pharaoh proclaims that they'll win this fight because they were his friends 5,000 years ago, and that means they hold a special bond that makes them strong like he does with the cheerleader squad. Considering I think it's very likely Isis is an ancestor of the Tomb Keepers clan, I think he's actually right about that deep level of bond. One thing I forgot to mention though, because they hardly mention it up until this point, is that there is technically a life point system here to the stand dual disc thing. To draw out the spirit monsters, or Ka, the user has to use their life energy, and so if the monster is destroyed, then it does serious damage to their life energy and they could actually die. I'm not sure how someone is supposed to replenish this, maybe a week off and a nap, but regardless, Karim doesn't have much energy left and knows he'll die easily because he's probably out of monsters, so he gives his life energy to Shada. This gives Shada enough strength to help fight back and reunite with the Pharaoh, where Karim gives his final goodbyes to everyone before dying, which is kind of sad. I liked his character design. Not wanting another friend to die, the Pharaoh orders Hassan to protect everyone while he goes off with Mahad to find Seto somewhere. Back to the cheerleader squad, they found the Pharaoh's tomb, and Yugi has to rely on his grandfather's stories of the place in order to avoid all the traps. One can hope Yugi's grandpa didn't forget anything like ancient Egyptian DDR or some shit, or else they're really screwed. They get all the way to where the puzzle was supposed to be stored and find a secret room that seems to be completely empty, except possessed Tristan points out that there's writing on the floor, and it basically says that you're only permitted to pass through if you give up what you wished for with the puzzle. If you read the manga from the beginning or watched the original audio, you know that this would be impossible since Yugi wished for friends who would never betray him and never leave his side. But if you watch the anime's English dub, then this dialogue was left out of season 1, so now it's a suspense thing. Meanwhile, Seto is kidnapped by Aknadin and is told that he has to take Kisara's Ka from her, which obviously he doesn't want to do because he clearly loves her, or at least I'm Delulu and I think he loves her. And even worse is that she's running right to where he is because her girlfriend senses are tingling. Kaiba is also following Kisara because I guess he wants to see why he keeps having these visions of this woman and what she's supposed to mean for his past life. Instead of listening to his crazy father, Seto and Kisara try to flee, but Aknadin prevents them and summons, I guess, goes to borrow Kaiba's angry digital form from the first part of Season 3. Wanting to protect her bae, Kisara then summons her Ka and leaves Kaiba stunned. This girl can summon the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Aknadin has the upper hand and entraps the blue-eyes white dragon in order to force it into a stone, and even attacks Ceco directly with piercing magic, but Kisara steps in. This damage to her physical body and her ka being forced in seals the deal, and so the blue-eyes white dragon is sealed in stone and Kisara is dead in Seto's arms, thus fulfilling the vision Kaiba has since Season 2. The Pharaoh arrives on time after Aknadin possesses Ceco, and so begins a battle between Ceco and the Pharaoh, thus fulfilling the prophecy on the stone tablet we've been seeing since Season 2. Except I have to pause Season 5 here to talk a little bit about the manga and how this affects Kaiba's characterization and the hype built up throughout both media. Remember when I said at the very beginning that Kazuki Takahashi was sick and so it affected the finale and how it played out? That and corporate meddling, because Shonen Jump sure loves meddling in a shonen manga that aren't about fighting every chapter. Yes, I'm still salty over the way Shonen Jump treated The Promised Neverland, JoJo's Part 3, and Death Note. Okay, so Kisara was still supposed to die, probably via Aknadin, but Ceco wasn't supposed to see that, and I'm guessing, based off Takahashi's vague wording in past interviews, was supposed to believe the Pharaoh killed her, and thus, instead of getting possessed, would have sought revenge against the Pharaoh, thus explaining why Kaiba was portrayed in a villainous light in both the manga and anime up until this point. This causes a massive retcon of the flashbacks and exposition before, and it also causes confusion as to why Kaiba and Yugi are fated rivals when their past lives generally got along and were cousins, which leaves plot holes because of it too when you go back and watch earlier seasons. However, you could just chuck this all up to faulty Egyptian batteries, you know? Okay, so let's press play and continue with the review. Possessed Ceco defeats Mahad, and so the Pharaoh is nearly killed by a white lightning attack, but Seto's pleas and Kisara's loyalty to only Ceco has her refuse to attack him, and so she despawns herself and into Seto's mind to destroy Aknadin like a good dragon girlfriend. Kisara then vows she will always protect and watch over Ceco, thus explaining why Kaiba and the Blue-Eyes White Dragon have a bond, because this card is quite literally his past life's dead girlfriend. Which, like, if it wasn't obvious by now, if your soul died in a stone tablet, then you were reincarnated as a duel monster card, which is why Kisara has no real-life counterpart unlike Isis, Shimon, etc. I mean, unless you subscribe to that weird theory that Serenity is Kisara reincarnated. I don't. I think it's a little bit of a crack theory, but that's just me. So Kaiba approaches the Pharaoh, and he's surprised he's actually here, and the Pharaoh gives him a TLDR to everything that's happened so far, where we cut to the game table for the Pharaoh and Bakura to go back and forth for Bakura to confess he's basically possessing Tristan. We cut back to the cheerleader gang, where Yugi confesses he wished for friends, which was basically the squad here, and possessed Tristan goes ahead and sacrifices the cheerleader squad to, quote, return the wish to find the Pharaoh's name. Possessed Tristan bounces to go find the name, and the cheerleader squad manage to avoid dying and chase after him. They finally find the Pharaoh's name, but they have to really memorize it, so hopefully at least one of these kids has a really good memory here for later. They head further down the room and see that obviously Tristan was fully possessed by Bakura, and so Yugi has to face off against now Yami Bakura to prove himself as a duelist on his own. Except, uh-oh, Zorc woke up, so this shit is so fucked. This is now a second instance in the anime, at least where Yugi has to prove himself as a duelist. This makes just a little more sense in the manga when characters are constantly questioning if Yugi is actually a good duelist or the Pharaoh is actually the good duelist and Yugi is just a hack. The anime, I feel, doesn't really touch on this question as much, but it's still good to see Yugi prove himself and his solo deck, which Yugi's solo deck is the Silent Swordsman series, a pretty good parallel to the Dark Magician series in my mind, actually. Back in the memory world, we finally get to see Zorc, and whew, the design of where the snake goes was definitely a choice, and the censorship was even worse here. Like, he looks pregnant? It's so stupid and I love it. Zorc launches an attack, but thankfully Hassan defends everyone from the attack until he dies. Back to the Pharaoh and Kaiba. They're there to see Ceco mourn Kisara, and I think Kaiba is still in denial that he's actually looking at the past, although Kaiba does feel weird about seeing his past life's dead girlfriend. Everyone's reunited together, but the Pharaoh is super weak from all this, so Seto offers to lead the army and people in his stead while he goes to do something else, I guess? Also, remember when I said this wasn't time travel? So yes, technically it isn't, because they're not actually in the past, but it is causing real-world chaos, because it's basically a conundrum that ancient Egyptian magic causes, so the world is falling into super bad chaos. Fighting against Zorc, everyone uses their stands to fight back against Zorc, but I mean, they do realize this is ultimate evil, so what the hell are they gonna do? In an attempt to kill him, I think, Bakura sends lightning or something, but Shada takes the blast instead, which kills him. Which is sad, because I like Shada, he was super loyal to the Pharaoh too. Shimon says there's still hope though, because Zorc kinda scattered the Millennium items around the area, and if they find it, they could possibly use their combined power to stop Zorc. I don't know how when 3 of the 7 users are dead, but worth a shot I guess. Isis and Mana insist together to find the items since Isis's signature monster has incredible eagle eye vision and Mana is just dark magician girl. Luckily they find all the items together pretty quick, so I guess Zorc is surprisingly organized. To distract Zorc so he doesn't notice they're giving the items to the Pharaoh, Mana books it to the Pharaoh's side while Isis uses her monster to attack Zorc and dies. There goes my theory that Isis was the ancestor to the Tombkeeper clan. Unless she had like a sister or something. Returning the items to Shimon first, he states that he was actually the original holder of the Millennium Key, and so he plans to use it to summon Exodia. Why didn't Shimon summon Exodia earlier? It's actually extremely powerful and had to be sealed in 5 tablets just to contain it, so this thing might actually be strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Zorc. Except this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Where only the protagonist can beat somebody, so Shimon fails and dies too. Now the only court members alive are Seto and Mana, and so she arrives just in time to give the Pharaoh his puzzle back. He uses the puzzle to summon all 3 Egyptian gods at once, and they already start beating Zorc's ass while all the other monsters did fuck all, so it looks like maybe things are looking up? Except Zorc was only injured, and so he came back up to cloud the sun and destroy the Egyptian gods. Now shit is completely doomed, and all the Pharaoh can do is just wish for Yugi to be here and help, either by finding his name or literally anything else. Speaking of Yugi, he's been dueling Yami Bakura number 2 this entire time, who has been using some pretty unfair tactics, but Yugi's been holding his own surprisingly well, but it does feel really drawn out to me. Back to the Pharaoh and his squad, Seto and Mana help the Pharaoh get away while Seto summons Blue Eyes White Dragon for the first time since Kisara's Ka was sealed in a tablet thingy, at least on his own when he's not possessed. And just like everything else in this battle, was instantly defeated just when we think things are gonna turn around. This even freaks Kaiba out, who has been doing literally nothing but watching everything. Again, he does nothing but watch, so I don't know why he's here. Except they finally make him do something by summoning Blue Eyes White Dragon again. I don't know how a hologram is gonna fight the incarnate of evil, but this is Yu-Gi-Oh! So don't question it. Also, am I the only one who noticed they never explain where the other 2 Blue Eyes White Dragon come from? I see a lot of theories say maybe she had a brother and a father based off another card series that resembles Kisara heavily, and that's who the other dragons are with Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, but I don't know, I always found it weird that they never explained the origin of the other 2 dragons. He does do a classic Yu-Gi-Oh! By summoning a bunch of monsters in one turn, then summoning Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon to attack Zorc. Well, we go back to Yugi, who finally won the duel. It only took, what, like 3 to 4 episodes or something like that? Before he gives Tristan his body back, he basically says they're all too late because Zorc is already here, and just yoinks, so you get Tristan back. If you're wondering about Thief King Bakura, because I completely did not notice this while recording and writing it, but he sacrificed his own soul to Zorc, so Thief King Bakura is also gone, so all that's left now is Dungeon Master Bakura. The cheerleader squad start booking it to meet the Pharaoh, and it turns out Joey and everyone else can summon dual discs too if they think really hard. But it all just kind of feels like a cheap cop-out to me. Then again, Bakura is the most unfair dungeon master ever. So maybe he just put in a cheat somewhere that characters from the future can have dual discs, but forgot to make rules that the Pharaoh's pieces can't do that or something. Joey and Tristan fight back against Bakura's ring wraiths, but Yugi suggests they just straight up fly because if you think really hard, you can literally do anything in this memory world. Again, that feels like a really cheap cop-out. Meanwhile, Mana managed to save the Pharaoh's life after nearly dying from the Egyptian gods dying, so she's instantly proved herself to be way better than Taya. For some reason, the Pharaoh uses the scales and just randomly creates the Master of Dragons soldier? When the flying fuck did he get Blackluster Soldier's Ka? And why is he wearing the armor like this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monsters? Okay, so that definitely didn't work. Except the time has come. The ultimate exposition has come! Exposition Ghost Shadi arrived from the pyramid to possess Hassan and protect him. Just before the Pharaoh was attacked again by Zorc, Shadi comes to protect him and uses the power of exposition to explain that Yugi and the others are coming with his name. And then Shadi dies, knowing his exposition purposes are finally done and over with. About to die by Zorc, the Pharaoh is literally begging for Yugi to arrive when the gang quite literally come flying in. They summon a bunch of monsters to give backup, Taya in particular summoning Fire Sorcerer, which I'm actually shocked she didn't summon Shining Friendship. Zorc also summons a bunch of monsters in one turn, so Mahad's ghost and Mana try to defeat them while the gang rush to the Pharaoh's side. The problem with the squad is that they know his name, but they just don't know how to read it, so they don't know how to tell him to seal Zorc away forever. It's double bad when Zorc is attacking their monsters and that attacks their life points. Zorc even wipes Mahad and Dark Magician Girl, which makes her die? Pass out? Not sure yet. They think all hope is lost until Taya notices the cartouche from earlier that still stayed in the memory world. It hits Taya that if they use their anything is possible magic in this world, they can carve the Pharaoh's name into the cartouche and he'll be able to read it since he knows how to read ancient Egyptian as seen with Merrick's back in season 3. With the power of friendship and Deus Ex Machina, the gang all huddle together and start to engrave his name into the cartouche, and it works! At long last, 5 seasons, we know the Pharaoh's name. He isn't Yami Yugi, the other Yugi, the nameless Pharaoh, or just the Pharaoh. His name is Atem. Gosh, that feels so good to say after writing all 5 seasons of this where I've been calling him Atem ever since I saw this season as a kid. For some fun ancient Egyptian trivia, Atem isn't an actual Egyptian name, but instead a made-up offshoot of the actual name of Atum, which was given to the Egyptian god of creation. Atum, according to a bunch of websites I saw, means whole or complete, which makes sense since Atem is now complete as a person since he knows his entire past and name now. Knowing his name, he uses his unlocked powers to revive the gods to fully attack Zorc again, but this time he fuses all 3 gods together to create a new monster entirely, the Creator of Light. Side note, this design is so epic, I love it actually. Summoning the literal personification of peace and light, Atem blasts Zorc and permanently destroys him this time, instead of just sealing him away for next time. Destroying Zorc for good saves the present with full peace restored, and Yami Bakura obviously loses his D&D game. The Creation of Light tells the squad that defeating Zorc defeated the ultimate evil in the entire world, so they're totally good now, and Atem can finally rest after he does one last thing presumably in the present. With the city being rebuilt, obviously Atem knows he can't stay here until he dies of sneezing or the ripe old age of 20, so he entrusts the duty of Pharaoh to Ceco. So Aknadin did all that bullshit for Ceco to become king, and he just becomes one anyway? If Aknadin just waited, Ceco would have been king anyways. Mana is also alive and waves goodbye, so thank goodness she didn't die because I actually really like Mana. The gang all wake up and everything's finally at peace and back to normal. Kaiba also hands Atem the Millennium Eye back now that obviously he doesn't need it, but Atem is definitely gonna need it. If you remember, Ryo Bakura was possessed by Yami Bakura, so even Ryo is finally back and fully freed from being captured in his own body, although he is a little weak from being mentally held prisoner by Yami Bakura. Meeting up with Ishizu, Merrick, and Odeon again, he tells them that he knows the final step in his journey is to seal the items away forever and enter the afterlife to be with his friends and family again. The gang is all devastated that Atem will be leaving already, but what is largely cut from the anime is that Atem stated this for a while and often expresses that his soul isn't at peace when he's in the modern world. Sure, he loves Yugi and the others, but he's been dead for 5,000 years, and I think any ghost would want to move on after all that time, you know? Ishizu and Merrick offered to take them to the Millennium Stone, where a final duel has to commence in order for Atem to move on to the afterlife. Just as they're on a boat to head to the stone tablet, Yuki's grandpa, Mokuba, and Duke Devlin decide to all head over too. Basically, Yugi's grandpa wanted to witness something super cool because he's bored and old. Duke is bored and eye candy, and Mokuba's just worried for his brother, I guess. Duke also explains he called everyone about the Pharaoh's final journey just so we get a quick "where are they now?" to show all the friends and enemies Atem and Yugi have made in their 4 years. Everyone's just kind of vibing and Raphael is in France? Okay, so to clarify the final duel thing, in ancient times it was a sword battle to the death with someone on equal footing with the person, but because this is Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a battle with duel monsters. Everyone is trying to figure out who will be Atem's final duel, and although Kaiba tries to volunteer, ultimately it's Yugi, because who better to duel than someone that Atem views as practically his own twin brother. So Yugi begins to assemble his deck while Atem takes a nap in the puzzle, and Taya expresses that she's actually really hurt to lose Atem. I know I normally argue about Taya being obnoxious and bitchy, but her being upset and somewhat argumentative about all this does make sense for once, so Taya gets a pass. She also saves the day with that gift shop cartouche thing too, so again, she gets a pass. Thus, everyone spends a peaceful final night as everyone thinks about how much Atem has helped and even changed their lives. When everyone arrives to the island and steps down to the Millennium tablet thingy, Taya expresses doubt in Atem returning to his home, but everyone agrees it's for the best. Putting all the items into the tablet and having Atem enact a final ritual, it splits Atem and Yugi apart from each other as a physical manifestation so the two can duel together. It's the first and only time Yugi and Atem have been in the same room, as well as the first time they've ever dueled each other. Now let me tell you that this is the longest duel in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! At 4 full episodes instead of just cutaways. And so I'm not gonna go over all the details because I'm not the best when it comes to the card game, so it's hard to tell sometimes what's cheating and what's fair, but let's be honest, of course there's gonna be a bit of cheating. In a clever turnaround move, Yugi wins the duel against Atem as we knew he would, but he starts to cry as he knows this really is goodbye to his best friend. Sure, he has friends now, but Atem wasn't just the first friend he ever made, but their friendship goes extremely deep. There's a reason they call each other Other Me in the original audio. They're also practically identical twins in one body. Some say it's more romantic or a soulmate thing, but I'm very anti-puzzle shipping, but you guys can describe their extremely close relationship however you want. Personally, I view them as practically like identical twins in one body. Atem is really proud of Yugi for not just proving himself as a duelist, but also showing how strong and confident he's become, and happy that he'll be at peace thanks to Yugi's heart. He tells Yugi that because of their bond and the way they've changed each other, Yugi giving Atem kindness and Atem giving Yugi courage, it means they'll always be in each other's hearts. If you think deeper about this though, it's genuinely devastating to know they will literally never see each other again. It's heavily implied in the manga that the Egyptian afterlife is separate from a regular one, and so even when Yugi someday dies, he won't be able to reunite with Atem even in the afterlife. It's honestly a punch to the gut, and I won't lie that after almost 20 years from this finale, I still get emotional about their goodbye. The door to the afterlife is ready, where Atem opens the door and will finally be able to rest in peace. Everyone says they don't want to say goodbye because they're not ready, but Joey says although it hurts, you can't forget real friends, and so they'll never leave their hearts. With a final goodbye, Atem gives a thumbs up as he walks into the afterlife. Okay, look, I am a grown-ass woman in my late 20s, but watching Atem leave off into the afterlife with his friends and family, giving that thumbs up as if to say everything will be okay, somehow always leaves me emotional. I mean, I'm not gonna cry because I'm not a kid anymore, but I'm gonna get emotional about it, damn it. With that, the tomb crumbles to pieces to forever bury the Millennium items. The dub ends with a hopeful idea of the future in front of where the tomb was, but the original anime goes a little further than this. Actually, I don't know why they stopped there when it keeps going, but I guess it's because it's through a music montage or whatever. The gang fly back home. Rebecca greets Yugi to make Taya jealous. Joey's greeted by Serenity, where we get that little love triangle action with Tristan and Duke again. Rex and Weevil still exist. Siegfried is working out a deal with Industrial Illusions for something. I don't know what, when Kaiba's the one who makes business with Industrial Illusions, but whatever. Maybe Siegfried is gonna make some tech for something else. With narration from Yugi that although Atem's story has ended, his own has just begun. Thus ends Yu-Gi-Oh! For the flaws I do point out, this honestly was a super fun and awesome storyline. Something about watching the Pharaoh's court have this interpersonal drama and watch shit go downhill so quickly was so fun. Were things drawn out? Yeah, but this is the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. I will never not love the final duel between Yugi and Atem earlier. Seeing these two get to talk in person and duel against each other is just so awesome and a once-in-a-lifetime event that it makes the finale feel genuinely more impactful. Even if we've already seen them duel each other in Season 4, so the weight is a little died down, but you know, it still holds a gut punch to me. Overall, I think the finale is genuinely amazing, aside from the filler. That was pretty boring. So apparently the main reason for the final season having such a massive downgrade in visual quality isn't because Studio Gallop ran out of money, because I was fully convinced that was the case, but lead animator on Yu-Gi-Oh! Takahiro Kagami quit after making the opening for Season 5, which without his stability and consistency, it made it difficult for animators to stay on model and do their jobs, I guess. Which is weird, because when has Yu-Gi-Oh's anime ever had stability and consistency when it came to art style? I'm not sure if that's really the case, but I guess that shows you how the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime must have been held together by a paperclip and a piece of string if one animator leaving causes this. On top of the artwork being very sloppy and clearly rushed, likely due to some kind of impossible schedule, there's a weird art style change near the end of the Memory World arc. I don't know how to describe this art style, but everyone has these weird, like, black lines over their nose and cheek. It's really off-putting and doesn't even remotely match literally any attempts at copying Kazuki Takahashi's style. However, after the Road to Ugly Town, the finale between Yugi and Atem isn't actually that bad, and at least goes on a note with everyone looking somewhat consistent and good looking. I mean, this is a very emotional finale to a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh fans. Can you imagine if it was ugly and wonky in the finale? Overall, the animation is horrible for a large majority of the season due to the lead animator leaving, and it shows because some of these episodes are straight up Ugly Town. In the original, Yami Bakura actually knows who Shadi is and explains that he's the one who will give Yugi the rest of the Millennium items. If you don't know why he knows that, we'll get to that during Darkside of Dimensions. In the original, Ryo Bakura pleads that he has nothing to do with any of this while he makes some vague pleas in the English dub. Cut was a scene showing the dead bodies of people who failed to pass the traps in Atem's tomb. Several of the traps and even mechanics of Atem's tomb were censored in the dub. In the original, one of the guides fell to his death instead of being sucked into the Shadow Realm, and another had the guide carrying guns. Yami Bakura states in the original that he actually has no idea who the fuck he is, just like Atem, but the difference is that he clings to his hatred, while in the original he claims he remembers everything. This to me is a huge difference when it means Yami Bakura's hatred is so strong that even without memories of what happened, he just wants revenge. While in the dub, it's thousands of years of unresolved trauma, I guess. Something about the original is kind of more intimidating knowing that he does this and even doesn't even try to remember why. There's cut dialogue where basically the cheerleader squad discuss how they had to scramble money to join Yugi on this trip. Taya had to cut into her ballet school in New York funds. Joey also had to cut into her funds to borrow money, so he's gonna get a job later to pay her back. And Tristan borrowed money from his sister, so I guess he has a sister now? When the gang reached the stone tablet and Taya gives Atem the cartouche, she mentions in the dub that there was a name on it that she doesn't remember seeing, but it was worn away. While in the original, she mentions that he's nameless for thousands of years because his name was lost to time. I don't know what it is about the dub making these major lore changes like this. I guess they wanted to fix continuity errors they might have made, or make things not sound so sad because kids can't handle sad things, I guess. The Pharaoh's court in the original were called his priests. I guess they assumed priest would have a different connotation in America, so they just changed it to his vague court. I guess that works, but priest does sound cooler. The only one of the Pharaoh's priests to have his name changed was Shimon, who is fully called Shimon Moran in the original, and just Shimon in the dub. I'm not sure why they removed the last name, but I guess they thought it was weird that everyone else had only one name. In the original, Shadi explains that Atem is reliving his entire past over again, and if he can't avoid his dream past thing by defeating the remnant of darkness that was clearly left behind in the dream world, that he'll be resealed in the puzzle. While in the dub, he explains that the world is gonna end or some basic BS like that because kids can't handle sad. Zorc doesn't tell Bakura about the 8th key. Bakura figures that out on his own. The dub most likely did that because this dub just assumes kids are stupid and won't remember the thousands of times that we've been told he sealed the darkness away into the puzzle via something. When showcasing Atem's past life with his father doesn't actually talk at all, as it was largely a show-don't-tell flashback, but you can see via his actions that he loved Atem. There were also skeletons in the temple thingy that showed some pretty brutal deaths, like an arrow to the chest, and Atem is also narrating this flashback too, as he realizes that he's seeing the past. After Atem is woken and warned by Hassan, he actually states that his father is watching over him, which causes Atem to try and find Hassan to ask how he knows about his father. He doesn't say anything about honoring his father's legacy, instead taking it in that his father actually did love him clearly. Kol Elna is portrayed completely different in both versions. In the dub, it's portrayed as a village of only criminals and evil people with darkness in their hearts, so it's not so brutal for kids to hear a bunch of innocent people got sent to the Shadow Realm by Atem's father. In the original, the village only had high crime rates because of the extreme poverty, and it shows in the original that there were largely innocent people who were murdered. When Shada is killed, there's a glowing light around him in the dub to make it look not so serious, and that his soul got sucked out and sent to the Shadow Realm or something in the original. He's straight up just killed by a lightning strike in the original. As Zorc attacked Blue Eyes White Dragon, it's censored in the original by having the shitty glowy effect when the snake peen bites the dragon's neck. Also, if it isn't obvious, Zorc's design was heavily censored because it looks, questionable. Also in the dub, everyone speaks in a Shakespearean dialect of thous and these thrown in. I guess they just assumed kids wouldn't know that this is ancient Egypt, so they try to make everyone talk in a stereotypical old-fashioned talk. It's honestly kind of cringe. There is a lot of ad-libbed, sassy dialogue. The biggest example would be the cheerleader squad in the puzzle, where every damn cutaway was Shadi and Joey arguing for some reason. In the original, we actually see a vague silhouette of what baby Yami Bakura sees when he saw his family, friends, and people dropped into a boiling vat of gold to be turned into the items. Good gosh, that's some Prince of Egypt levels of dark shit right here. Yu-Gi-Oh's final season, aside from the boring-ass filler in the beginning, was actually really fun. It was cool to see how Atem lived as a pharaoh as well as getting his name. I remember when I was a kid, my jaw dropped when we learned about his name because I thought I'd end up calling him Yami Yugi until the end of the series. The ending is just really bittersweet to me. I just love Atem's character, And there's this part of me that wants to slap some Deus Ex Machina happy ending where Atem gets his own body and just hangs out with the cheerleader squad for the rest of their lives, but Atem has always stated in the Japanese version in the manga that he is a soul who doesn't belong here and needs to rest where he belongs. As a kid, I didn't really understand that because the dub didn't convey that, and so you bet your ass as a little kid, I was crying in front of the TV when Atem walked away giving that thumbs up. Even now, especially after Kazuki Takahashi's death, that scene where he gives that thumbs up just leaves me a little emotional actually. To quote the ye old Tumblr days, it gives me the feels. Despite its flaws, I still really like the final season, and I still fucking love Yu-Gi-Oh! For all its cringe dialogue in the dub, plot holes, bad animation, and the entirety of Taya, I still love this series. From the age of about 4 years old to now as a 26-year-old, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just one of those series I've constantly loved throughout my life, and I think I will until I'm dead. Who knows, maybe my tombstone when I die as an old lady will have the Millennium puzzle on it. This isn't the end of the adventures of Yu-Gi-Moto though, as we still have to cover the manga, Darkside of Dimensions, and Season 0. Hopefully it won't take nearly as long as this did. I had a lot of stuff going on while I was writing this, so I'm hoping that Darkside of Dimensions won't take too long to review, or whatever I decide to review next. What did you guys think of this entire anime? Did you love the ending? I did, but I'm super curious what other people thought of the ending to Yu-Gi-Oh! As always, let me know down below. Hey guys, thanks for watching! If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you're new. If any of you would like to help support my channel in any possible way, my Ko-fi page is down below in the description, along with all of my social media. For any subscribers, new or old, who'd like to help with video ideas, or maybe just want to talk about anime or something, I have a fan server linked down below. See you next time!